Thanks for inviting me to speak today. So those of you that don't know me, I'm Dan Stern. I'm a member of the Equine Lameness Prevention Organisation and I'm currently on the board of directors. So what I'm going to talk through today is it's the Equine Lameness Prevention Organisation, or ELPO. It's our method of hoof mapping and how we recognise and grade hoof distortions. So the first thing I've done when I was asked to come and speak here was I got on good old Google and looked for ideas for doing presentations, and luckily Amazon do a great presentation starter pack. So if I do a runner halfway through, you know the Imodium ain't quite kicked in yet. So as I say, going to talk about ELPI foot mapping, and this is something that we've brought in from our level 1 certifications, which is the live sole hoof mapping. So we used to, or we get people to talk through, as they're doing their certifications, the practicals, we ask them to describe the foot they're seeing. And you used to say, well, you know, the heels have got a bit long, they've run forward, the frog's atrophied, and it's long in the toe. Well, how long is it in the toe? How atrophied is the frog? And how far are the heels run forward? So we started bringing in this grading in 2008 at the level 4 courses. And then in 2010, 2011, it was introduced to the lower levels. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk through just a quick brief hoof mapping, the different types of distortions that we see in the equine foot, so the frog, the bars, the heels and the toe. So the grading system we use is on a scale of 0 to 5. So 0 is non-distorted and 5 being the most distorted. So 0 to 1 distortions are what we're going to expect to see within sort of when it comes round to the next shoeing cycle or trimming horses that are just due to be shod. 2 to 3 grade distortions. These are distortions that probably haven't been dealt with at the prior shoeing. Horses that have gone longer than they should have done. And then we get into our grade 4 and 5 distortions, and these are severe distortions. We're going to be seeing gait faults, toe first landing. We're going to have lameness issues, and long-term severe distortions is going to start to cause internal pathologies. So it's great for data collection. You can recognise the severity of the hoof distortions of a new customer. You can measure where you are before and after you've trimmed the foot. You can track distortions over a long period of time. So some horses that have got grade 4 or 5 distortions, you're probably not going to get them back to a grade 0, 1 in one shoeing, but you can track it over 6, 9 months to a year. It's great for documenting and tracking lameness and performance with clients. Double checking your hoof preparation. You can come back to your mapping and to your distortions to just double check your work. And it's a great way of communicating with vets, owners and other farriers. And this is just a sheet. I should have brought some with me. This shows the evaluation. So with mapping, the first thing we want to do is locate what we call the dimple. And this is a fixed static point at the back of the foot. It's in a barefoot horse, it's the rearmost weight bearing or weight loading structure. So we look for the V in the back of the central sulcus. you get a flattening area on the back of the frog below the bulbs, and where the connoisseurs finish to the heel buttress and the frog buttress where they meet. A line through all three, and then your dimple drops in the middle, and this is the rearmost part of the foot. So when we talk about foot mapping, we're not talking about trying to find your way somewhere. We're talking about using fixed external reference points to locate internal structures. So as I say, the first part we locate is the dimple at the back of the foot, and then we want to find the true apex of the frog. And there's a couple of ways of finding the true apex. You can exfoliate it back until you get the nice rounding at the apex of the frog, or you can generally take this measurement here to the widest arc of the sole, and that gives you your length of your central sulcus, and the length of the central sulcus doubled gives you your true apex of frog, and this has been taken down in dissections to corium level. So once we've got the true apex of frog, we come back about an inch in a sort of 5 to 5.5 inch foot. We find the widest arc of the functional sole, and that's the sole, not the inside of the wall, because the inside of the wall can distort, and the widest part can move, but the widest part of the functional sole stays the same. And then the termination of the bars, and all three of these generally line up, and this gives us the approximate centre of articulation of the coffin joint. You then take, again using the central sulcus or the first measurement I showed you on the lateral side, or again on a 5 to 5.5 inch foot, it's approximately 1 3/4 inches forward from the centre of articulation, and that gives you the approximate tip of the pedal bone. And then about 1/4 inch in there, forward from there, generally seems to be the optimum point of breakover. And that's not where you rip the toe back to, it's just where you place mechanics in whatever shoe you're applying. And then the toe pillars, and these generally, we found there is modified papillae in the area of the toe pillars, and these are actually weight-bearing structures in barefoot horses, and they generally line from the apex of the frog forward to the point of breakover as well. And then this is just a 50-50 line, so from the widest part of the foot to the centre of articulation, from the dimple to the widest part of the foot, from the widest part of the foot forward. So this is our 50-50 line. So just to look on you can see I've measured I've marked the V in the back of the foot. I can use that. Where the connoisseurs come to, or the frog buttress and the heel buttress where they meet, and then the dimple is in the middle. Apex of frog, measure back 1 inch. Marking where the bars are terminating and the widest arc of the functional sole. Draw a line through the three, and this generally gives us our centre of articulation of the coffin joint. 1 3/4 inches forward to the tip of the pedal bone, and then 1/4 inch in front of there gives us the approximate or the optimum point of breakover. And then your shoe is applied, and it doesn't matter what shoe you apply, but what we're looking to achieve is from the last weight bearing structure to the centre, and then from the centre to the point of breakover. The absolute optimum is 60% weight bearing behind the centre of articulation, and then to 40% to the point of breakover. And then just a different foot marked in the central sulcus, doubled, true apex of frog, inch back, widest arc of the functional sole, termination of the bars, and there's our centre of articulation of the coffin joint, tip of pedal bone, optimum point of breakover. And then your shoe is applied. We've got just slightly better than 50-50 ratios, probably 45-55. And it works with toe clip shoes as well. But as you can see, I've had to quite heavily modify the toe on, it's a Mustad equilibrium, and I've just had to put a bit more mechanics into the toe just to get the breakover, point of breakover back to where we're looking to get it. So we move on to distortions, and frog distortions, these are going to occur when the heels have got too long and the back of the frog is no longer participating in weight bearing and it's not supporting the foot. The frog apex can start to get pulled forward with a distorted toe. So this, a normal or non-distorted frog, it's going to have a central sulcus that's nice and round. It's got a rounded bottom, it's open, and it's not diseased. And the buttress of the frog, it's wide and it's really prominent in the back of the foot. And you've got a nice rounded frog apex. So these are the zeros and the 1 distortions. Then we get into the minor distortions. The central sulcus is starting to slightly close up. It's still got a distinct bottom to it, but it's narrowing. The buttress is still wide and it's still got a prominence in the foot. But the apex is starting to narrow and it's starting to slightly stretch. So now we're getting to grade 2 distortions. So now we're starting to get into the moderate distortions, which are going to start to cause sort of pain in the foot and internal pathologies. The central sulcus is going to start to be closed up. You're going to have a deep sensitive bottom. The buttress of the frog is narrow, it's atrophied. The apex is narrow and stretched, and it's probably going to be welded to a distorted toe, or welded to the stretched sole where the toe's distorted. So these are grade 3 distortions. And then the severe distortions, the central sulcus is going to be closed up, deep sensitive bottom, you're going to have thrush, it's diseased, it's sore. The buttress of the frog is really narrow, it's really atrophied. And the apex is going to be extremely stretched, and it's highly likely it's going to be welded to the stretched sole. And these are grade 4 and 5 distortions. So a grade 0 distortion on a frog, you're looking at the frog length being twice the length of the central sulcus. If it's 20% longer, you're into a grade 1 distortion. 40% or I need to change these numbers. 40% of the central sulcus length on top of the frog is a grade 2, 60% grade 3, 80% grade 4, and then if the frog is 3 times the length of the central sulcus, then you're at a grade 5 distortion. So heel and bar distortions, these are going to occur when The heels have been allowed to grow beyond the level of the functional sole, and they're going to start to drive forward and become run under. So again, we use the central sulcus. If the heels are at the back of the central sulcus, then they're non-distorted, 20% one, 40% two. And if they extend right to the apex of the central sulcus, then they're grade 5. Bar distortions are a bit more difficult to grade, but we generally go with 1/4 inch increments on a sort of average size foot. And from the connoisseur of the frog, we allow 1/2 inch to the widest arc of the bar, and that would be a 0 distortion. An extra 1/4 inch, a 1, all the way up to, if you're 1.25 inches from the connoisseur, bar's going to be fractured, abscessing, then you're at a grade 5. So just showing how over the time how the heels distort and the bars distort. So non-distorted heels, they're going to end very close to the dimple in the back of the frog, and the bars are going to be fairly straight, and they may have a slight sort of gradual arc, 0s and 1s. Minor distortions, the heels still end close to the dimple in the back of the frog. They're less than halfway down the central sulcus, but they're going to start getting some curvature to them. The bars are going to have a gradual arc, and it's pretty much going to match the arc of the heel curvature. So in the moderate distortions, we're going to start seeing some heel pain. The heels are going to end ahead of halfway down the central sulcus. The bars are going to have quite an arc, and they're probably going to start having kinks, and they're most likely going to be laid over. So these are grade 3 distortions. And then our severe distortions are grade 4s and 5s. The heels are ending way ahead of the dimple in the back of the frog, and they're close to or beyond the apex of the central sulcus. The bars have got a severe arc, they're laid over, and you're often going to see bruising and abscessing, and they're going to have pretty sharp kinks to them. So the heels and the bars, we start seeing abscessing when the heels have been allowed to grow beyond the level of the sole. It's causing them to drive forward. They've become run under, and it causes the bars to bend or curl. It leads to a tissue mass or knot in that region, and it causes pressure necrosis in the solar corium, which leads to the abscessing. And if you've graded a distortion as a grade 3, but it's abscessed, then we automatically downgrade it to a grade 4. If it's a grade 4 and it's abscessed, then it's automatically downgraded to a grade 5. That's my cue to have a drink. So toe distortions. These occur when you're going to start removing excessive sole material in the toe region, and you cause a weak formation of the sole produced by the terminal papillae. We then rasp the hoof wall down to the level of the sole to try and improve the the hoof wall angle. And then as the horse is moving, we get leverage on the dorsal wall, and this causes forward movement of the toe, or flaring. And as the toe flares, it drags the sole forward, and it starts to pull the frog apex with it. And this goes back to Hickman-Farrier. We see the image in Hickman-Farrier. You've got a slightly broken back foot. What do? You push the toe down. But this is what we do. So we start to thin the sole, and then we push the toe down to meet the sole, and then we weaken this area here, and it causes the toe to distort. And this can be seen on this foot. This was one that come into the vets that I do a bit of work for. 4-year-old show jumper. He'd been left to have a bit of heel height, but the toe had been pushed down to try and get a good angle. But as you can see, it started to cause the toe to flare. So normal or non-distorted toes, the distance from the widest part of the foot to the dimple is almost equal from the widest part of the foot to the toe. And we allow sort of a bit of leeway, just over about 1/4 of an inch more than 50-50 for the hoof wall thickness. The dorsal wall is basically straight from the hairline to the ground. But then minor toe distortions, the distance from the widest part of the foot to the toe is slightly longer from the widest part of the foot to the dimple. And the dorsal wall is going to have a slight deviation just below the hairline, and then it's straight from there down. And the extra toe length is primarily due to normal hoof wall growth within a shoeing or trimming cycle. So then we get into the moderate distortions, the grade 2s, and the distance from the widest part of the foot to the toe is going to be about 1.5 times the length longer than it is from the dimple to the widest part of the foot. The dorsal wall has a deviation just below the hairline, and the hoof wall continually flares from there down. And the sole laminae and the hoof wall are stretched. And then we get our severe toe distortions. And this is where the widest part of the foot to the toe is twice the length of the widest part of the foot to the dimple. The dorsal wall has a deviation just below the hairline, and the wall continues to just go out like a ski slope. And the sole, the laminae, the hoof wall, they're all just totally stretched. So here we've got a foot, the dimple, apex of the central sulcus, the buttress in the back of the foot. Even though the heels are run forward, it's still got quite a good buttress, so this is a grade 1. But the central sulcus is a grade 2. It's starting to close up. The frog apex is a grade 1. The medial heel is a grade 2, lateral heel is a grade 4. Medial bar is a grade 1. Lateral bar, grade 2. And the toe is a grade 2. So we have these evaluation forms, and customers love filling these in. You just go through the grading the foot, tell the customers the numbers, and they can put them in. And it's also a great way, as I say, of communicating with other farriers. So we can talk about feet. We've got a frog width of 0, frog length of a 0. The medial heel and the medial bar are grade 1. The lateral heel and the lateral bar are a grade 1, and the toe length is a grade 2. Well, this is just a foot that's due to be trimmed, a horse that's come back round to the full shoeing cycle. But then we've got a frog width and a frog length of 3, a medial bar and a medial heel grade 2. The lateral heel is a grade 4. The lateral bar was a grade 4, but it's got a fracture, so it's a grade 5. And the toe length is a grade 4. So this is the kind of distortions that we're going to see with a mediolateral and also a dorsopalmar imbalance. And then we've got a frog width of a grade 3, but the frog length is a 0. The medial bar, the medial heel are 0s, the lateral heel and the lateral bar are 0s, but the toe lengths are grade 3. So what feet get long in the toe but don't have distorted heels? You're not getting a distorted frog apex, but the frog width is slightly atrophied. The frog width is slightly atrophied. This is a typical distortion grade that we see with club feet. And then we get a foot with a frog width of a 0 and a frog length of a 0, but the central sulcus quality is a grade 4. The medial heel and the medial bar are grade 4s, and the lateral heel and the lateral bar are grade 5. But the toe length is a 0. Does anyone know what sort of foot would see these distortions? This is the sort of distortions that we're seeing with a negative palmar angle P3. So you get the ball nosing of the toe, but you've got a big, large, bulbous frog in the back of the foot that's just trying to help stabilise that pedal bone. And it's got a slight mediolateral imbalance. So common pathologies that are directly and indirectly caused by hoof distortions, we're looking at navicular syndrome, bone spurs on the navicular bone, ring bone and arthritis, coffin joint disease, and then we're seeing lesions of the collateral ligaments, the distal impar ligament, and the deep flexor tendon. So the basic guidelines for treating or preventing these common hoof distortions is we use the functional sole plane for determining our dorsopalmar and also our mediolateral balance. Ideally, we want to trim the hoof wall close to the level of the sole and equal on both sides. The shoe or trim, ideally we're wanting to balance it equally 50-50 around the widest part of the foot. And we're looking for the heels to end close to the back of the frog, and we want a slight heel first landing. The frog should contact the ground, and we're looking to encourage good dirt compaction to get into the back of the foot to encourage.
Anyone got any questions they'd like to throw up there? Yep, one question here.
Dan, with your hoof mapping,
Yep.
When you take the measurements of the lateral live sole,
Yeah.
what happens? Oh, try and lick it. If you've got a medial lateral imbalance, and that's not necessarily that's distorted as well, what do you do with that measurement?
We generally find that the sole itself, if you exfoliate down to the functional sole, that remains the same. It doesn't distort. The hoof starts to distort as it's getting longer than the level of the functional sole. So even with mediolateral imbalances, we generally find that on the lateral side, that from the commissure to the widest arc of the functional sole, it pretty much remains a consistent measurement. I mean, obviously there's horses that aren't gonna fall into that. Club feet is an example, and that's where you need to find the true apex of the frog, or try and really locate the true central sulcus.
Okay. It's great, yeah. Thanks.
Okay.
Anyone else got a question? Yeah, one gentleman here.
If you have mediolateral imbalance on a foot, how quickly do you address it to level it?
It depends on how distorted the foot is. So if we've got a grade 4 lateral heel, grade 2 medial heel, the first thing we would do is try and get the lateral heel back to a grade 2, so it's matched the least distorted heel. And if we can push it back further to a grade 1, we'd then take the medial heel to a grade 1. So we wouldn't take the medial heel from a grade 2 to a grade 1 or to a grade 0 first, because if we can only get the lateral heel from a grade 4 to a grade 3 or 2, then we've still got a medial lateral imbalance. So it might be something we'd address at the second shoe-in and see if we can get the distortions back further. So our 4s and 5s we're probably not going to get rid of in one shoe-in, but we can track them over sort of a few shoe-in cycles.
Would you also, when you are trimming and you have one side higher than the other,
Yep.
but you cannot lower the high side anymore, otherwise you draw blood, would you build up
Yeah.
the lower one
Yeah,
on the shoe or on the foot?
I would do the shoe. I would modify the shoe really. I would try and trim the foot best I can level, and then add mechanics to the shoe rather than leave distortions in the foot. And would watch the horse walking as well and see how it's landing. And it's great with the smartphones and iPads and that now. You can take slow motion videos, so you can really see exactly how they're landing before and after shoeing.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else? Anyone else got a question? John Nesbitt, come on. You're a man that likes to know things.
Someone must have a question.
There you go.
This side.
Yeah. Rob will be there now. We've asked John. Go on, John. Think of something.
If not, Mr. Legg must have something to say about it. No.
John Ford down the front.
That's all the beer he drank last night.
It's either that or he was so good they've learned everything they need to learn from him.
Yeah.
So that's fine. That's a good sign.
Don't know about that.
Dan, you're talking about feet.
Yep.
How much do you put into looking at the actual horse's conformation when it comes to medial lateral? Personally, I find a great view of a horse's foot, especially on the front foot, is looking straight between the hind legs.
Yep.
And looking down through the cannonbone.
Yeah.
Because we've got all these joints, and when
Yeah.
we start talking about medial lateral balance,
Yeah.
You just keep on looking at this foot and trimming the foot rather than actually
Well, when
trimming
we're
it to
using
what that
the
horse's individual conformation is.
when we're using the sole plane, you generally find that when you get down to the functional sole plane, you're equidistant either side below the solar surface of the pedal bone. But obviously, we also do dynamically watch the horses, watching them walk up. I'm not quite sure what your question is.
My question is really that to pick up a foot, it's very similar actually, all right, getting your T-square and so forth.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereby, as we all know, can throw you right out.
Yeah.
And again, where I'm looking at when I look at a horse's foot, and we can have all these measurements and so forth, the basic principles, such as you have just pointed out, really, the breakover of a foot from a 5-inch foot to a 7-inch foot is virtually the same.
Yeah.
Because the horse's foot gets longer, it may get wider.
Yep.
Yeah. But the actual distance between the point of the pedal bone to the breakover is virtually the same. Would you agree with that? Generally.
Yeah, generally. I mean,
Yeah.
it's marginal how much it goes up. So yeah, generally, it's about the same. But with sort of what you were saying about looking at the horse statically, I think you're better off watching the horse moving than watching it while
Totally agree.
the foot's just loaded. I don't know if you can assess medial lateral balance that well with the foot on the ground, because confirmation comes in and
Yeah. But there again, weight falls in straight lines, as we all know.
yeah.
And therefore, yes, we are shoeing horses statically to a degree. Yeah. But I feel that rear view, looking down straight through the tendon, because really when you're getting actually
And looking at the height of the bulbs and
Yeah.
yeah.
you know, you're going to have a horse that's actually probably towing out, but because of some deformation of the, let's say, knee, fetlock, what have you, you'll find that probably that tendon, if you look down through the back of the tendon, right, will probably drop towards the inside, whereby you'll need that horse to have a little bit more cover
Yeah.
on the medial side, yeah, so that you center that line through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's-
Okay. As long as we're on the
Yeah.
same road. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brilliant. There must be people this end of the room. No one want to ask any questions? I'm going to look at you, Sam. He's hiding his head.
One more
Oh,
question
we've got
over
one
here.
You're saved. I'm coming to you next.
All right, Dan.
All right.
So, do you rather than the other way around, hoof distortions causing internal pathologies?
Yeah.
Do you see internal pathologies ahead of time, if you like, through hoof distortion? So, like, if a horse starts moving differently, would you think, oh, this is getting away from me now? I can see something coming in the future. Because I've seen a few horses, like, say, just going out of shape, and you think, why is that going out of shape? Why is that distorting? It shouldn't be happening. It's shod regularly, and then all of a sudden, like in the summer, a bit of hard
develops
ground,
issue.
and it goes lame, and then
Yeah,
all of
yeah.
a sudden, it's like got navicular, and you can see the distortion, and you're trying to keep it in check, and you've still got the lameness coming.
I don't know.
So like it's coming the other way around. So the pathology is
internal
causing the
pathology is
distortion.
starting to yeah, it probably would. If they're, especially with something like navicular, where they're going to start getting heel pain, and they're going to start toe first landing, then you probably are going to see the frog start to atrophy, and the buttress of the frog is going to narrow. And then you just try and work with what you've got, rather than trying to play God. And
Oh no, sure, but can you see something coming? That's what I'm saying. And it's the other way around. Like you're saying that hoof distortions are causing the problems, but sometimes the problems are there anyway.
yeah, I would say yeah. If that-
Wonderful. We've got a couple of minutes. Bob, did you say you had someone?
Does anyone here want to speak? Anyone got any questions? This might be your last chance to ask him. And even if it's trivial, you think there's not really that important, something you just might have questioned yourself through the lecture. To you, it might be simple. Other people might think it's a really good question. Anyone got anything?
I've got a quick one. I know you're on tomorrow. How much do you charge for a set?
£85,
There we go. And how much for a trim?
25.
Visit?
No,
Cup of tea?
coffee.
Coffee.
Yeah.
Done. Right. Thank you very much. It's always quite good to know. Dan, really appreciate this is one of your first lectures you've ever done to an audience of this many farriers. You've done an amazing job. Thank you. I think Dan deserves a big round of applause for
Big
that.
hand for Dan.